This is a habit, isn't it? The stray thought crossed Ilishnish's mind as she wandered around the shaded trails of Shork's clanhold. Though the Osala called it that, it was more a lived-in ruin than anything else. It's because I grew up in Fioburkana. No, it would have eventually happened anyway. Since Fioburkana had been her home for over a century, the habit was a strong one. The mountain dwarf capital was a ruin that she had explored in her younger years. That exploration showed her that many interesting and valuable things could be found in ruins, and she gained an appreciation for the things that her father wouldn't take away. One could even say that becoming a bard was a product of those experiences. Thus, ruins attracted her. They were a potential source of lore and treasure, which she was very good at sniffing out. Except once I get home, father will take it away. No, father is dead. Then who will take it away? Her lair was her own. Hedgenmal went there sometimes, but he was harmless. She had a mistress, but her mistress never took things from her for no reason. It was probably safe to bring back treasure from ruins now. Unlike Fioburkana, which had also been devastated by the demon gods, Rolengork was not protected from the elements by a cave and frozen solid. It was the exact opposite. In fact, traces of what once stood before were worn away, overgrown and buried over the generations. Is the rest of the city like this? Ilishnish asked. Soraka had us take a detour to the Draconic Kingdom not long after we arrived, Mitra answered. We didn't even know this was up here back then, but the rest of the city has traces of the civilization that once flourished here. What makes you believe it was flourishing? The level of technology and how it was applied. We think that if what was here had survived to the present day, they would have been comparable to the Central Powers. That seemed promising. If they were flourishing, chances were that they had all sorts of valuables stashed away. They turned the corner of the building that Shork and her family called home. It was a long, roughly triangular stone prism fashioned from the rubble of whatever was once there. The front of the building had the most intact pieces, presumably for appearance's sake, while the other faces were covered in dirt and grown over by bushes, vines and small trees. Ilishnish tried to make sense of the gigantic jumble, but she couldn't piece together anything recognizable. What do you think this was? Since Shork said this is her ancestral clanhold, Mita replied, it should be safe to make certain assumptions. The uppermost parts of every clanhold that we've seen here belong to the ruling family, so this structure should have been the equivalent of a hall. A hall, as in a manor? Or a palace? This building covers a pretty big area, so it was probably some sort of palace. In that case, the ruling elite usually try to leave some record of their history, but I haven't seen anything of the sort. That's the interesting part, Mitra said excitedly. Because the pieces of rubble are bare of any carvings, they must have used another method to keep their records. As in an archive. Exactly. If we can find that, I can't even begin to imagine what we'd learn. Except. There's something dark behind this devastation. It's as if these demon gods came here specifically to destroy all traces of civilization. Even the colossal trees were felled by them, and that's where we would probably have found any record-keeping from before the existence of libraries. What about oral traditions? Ilishnish asked. The people here do have bards of their own. I haven't yet found anyone that knows anything from over 2 centuries ago, Mitra answered. The ruling caste here utilizes bards to legitimize their rule, so anything you hear is likely associated with the elite of the present day. Their culture is a collection of long-forgotten scars. Yes, sorrow tinged Mitra's tone. Whatever those demon gods were, they were pretty thorough about making sure no one remembered what came before. The population of Rolengork today is likely descended from the few who survived the calamity, and the struggle for survival had them lose what little history they retained. All that's left are long-forgotten scars like this clanhold. They continued on their way around the old palace, climbing up its sides as they looked for traces of the past. Ilishnish stopped and looked down at the building when they reached its crest. Broken pieces of dark grey basalt had been roughly fitted together into some sort of display piece, or at least there was a slot for one. Shouldn't there be something here? She said. Looks like it, Mitra replied. You can see where it's supposed to go. They cleaned this up good, but the capstone or statue or whatever fit into this mounting is gone. Ilishnish looked over the plaza in front of the palace. Surrounding it were 4 mounds of broken stone that Karabaki suggested were once temples. The center of the plaza had a destroyed fountain that fed channels leading down to the lower terraces. Their observations felt incomplete, however, so Elishnish stretched out her senses, trying to get a feel for the essence of the place. "This is a temple, isn't it?" she said after a moment. "We're standing on the palace," Mitra said. "The other buildings to the sides were probably temples." Since the Beastman Bard didn't have blind sight, she couldn't see what was buried underground. After walking around the upper terrace, however, Elishnish had a good idea of what the place looked like before it was destroyed. "No, I meant that this entire upper level of this clanhold is a temple, or maybe that's not right? This hall is not the center of the complex, that fountain is." She couldn't tell them exactly what she sensed under everything, so she could only hint at the overall layout of the place. Just a second." Elishnish looked around quietly while Mitra entered into some distant conversation. It seemed that she could use the communication ability that lords of many different species could harness. That, or she had some unknown bard skill that facilitated long-distance communication. A few minutes later, Karawaki jogged over to join them. She gazed out at the plaza for a moment before casting a spell. "Fly." The priestess, at least that's what Elishnish assumed a sacred claw was, rose into the air and flew out over the fountain. "I think you're right," Karawaki said as she returned to alight beside them. "The plaza and the area around it has a certain layout that suggests religious influence. Vila is central to the pantheon of Rolengork. She is a water goddess, but not the same water god that one finds in the usual elemental pantheon. They have a separate identity for that one. Vila is unique to Rolengork and the Draconic Kingdom, as far as we've seen. While she does have the destructive aspects attributed to any elemental entity, she is still the most beloved of all the deities in Rolengork and considered the source of life." Karawaki pointed a claw out to the fountain, tracing the channels that radiated out from it. "That old fountain may represent Vila. There might have even been an idol of some sort there in the past. The channels would represent the waters of life emanating out and through the entirety of the clanhold. The 4 mounds of rubble placed in the cardinal directions were probably temples of other prominent gods, but I couldn't find any trace of who was worshipped at each of them." "If we fix the fountain," Elishnish asked, "will this goddess pop out?" Mitra and Karawaki stared at her. "That might be scary if it did happen," Mitra said. Maybe you're right," Elishnish agreed. Gods were always powerful beings in all of the stories that she had heard, and they were just as often malevolent as benevolent. Having them just pop up presented many risks. They descended from the palace, going over to the broken fountain. There, Pebble and Pinecone were standing around with several gladestalkers from Davy's merchant guard. At the base of one of the broken temples, Voltava was sitting around with a few of the Beastman druids. "What are you people up to?" Mitra asked. One of the gladestalkers, a female Nar named Kasturi, held up a sling. "Their weapons are amazing," she said. "They use much better material than ours." "What are they made out of?" In response, Kasturi pointed a claw at Voltava. "He sheds his wool every spring, and they make all sorts of stuff out of it. It's ridiculous. It's a fabric, yet it's already comparable to mithril." "Wow," Mitra said. "Davy will go crazy when she finds out about that." Do they sell any?" "That's a complicated question." Kasturi looked toward Pebble and Pinecone. "Our people form small units," Pebble said. "2 of us with one of them. That relationship lasts for a lifetime, and all of the wool products you see are derived from that relationship." "That sounds pretty exclusive. I guess the wool isn't for sale?" "The only source would be from young that don't develop properly and die during their first winter." Mitra made a face. "Okay, that's not grim at all," she said. Well, it's not as if we have any trade routes that go out here." "Are the materials we use that much better than what you're using?" Elishnish asked. In response, Kasturi rose to her feet with the Kronos wool sling in hand. "Karawaki," Kasturi said, "could you summon a huge earth elemental for us, please?" "Sure, where do you want it?" That mound over there," Kasturi pointed to one of the broken temples. "Don't want to accidentally send a bullet flying somewhere." Karawaki held out a paw toward the mound. "Summon Monster V." A 5-meter-tall mound of living basalt rose out of the ground. Going by what Elishnish sensed, it was on the border between mithril and orichalcum in raw strength. "Well, Karavaki is much stronger than I thought she was. Are they all like that? Like Ilishnish, the members of Devi's entourage all employed some method of concealing their strength. They even appeared to be trained to not give away any tertiary clues, making it difficult to figure out how powerful each member of the group was. What she could discern was that their equipment smelled far more valuable than what humans in the Irantal region used, which suggested that they probably had the strength to match. It's rare for demi-humans to be such strong casters, Ilishnish noted. I don't think I've seen any aside from our people. Ah, it's because Karavaki is a Lega, Mitra said. They're bred for their skills in magic. How come I haven't seen any local Lega? Well, this isn't a very progressive place. The people here stick to their own species due to custom or taboo. Mixed species beastmen aren't common in the Confederacy, but neither are they shunned in any way. Lega are special since they're one of the only innate casters amongst beastmen. Does that mean there are plenty of Lega in the Beastmen Confederacy filling caster roles? Ilishnish asked. Well, they're difficult to produce, but they're prominent in the religious caste. For everything else, humanoid species have an easier time filling caster roles. Kasturi fished out a bullet out of one of her pouches, placing it in the cradle of the sling. She whirled it over her head for a moment before sending the projectile flying toward the huge earth elemental. The elemental shattered, crumbling into fragments that dissipated into motes of magic. Everyone blinked silently at the result. Whoops, Kasturi said. You totally did that on purpose. Karavaki growled. How many martial arts did you put into that? I used up all of my focus. I swear you always get so greedy when it comes to new equipment. Ilishnish raised a paw. How does that compare to what you usually use? Kasturi looked at Karavaki. The sacred claw sighed. Summon Monster V. Another huge earth elemental appeared. Kasturi switched to her own sling, loosing a bullet at her new target. A giant hole was blasted through the center of its mass, but it remained standing. Karavaki said. Mitra, can you start healing it? Eh? That's going to take forever. A familiar sensation washed over Ilishnish. It wasn't exactly the same as hers, so it took her a moment to recognize it. Mitra, you're a dancer? Yeah, what about it? The only other dancers I've seen up until now were performance artists. The theatrical sort. Wait, you're a dancer too? I just started, but yes. Mitra bounced over to place her paws on Ilishnish's shoulders. Kya. This is great. What dances do you have? As I said, I just started. Well, I can do the healing thing that you're doing right now. Plus I have one other. This isn't a dance, it's just a form. I knew that. I'm surprised your instructor hasn't encouraged you to learn any dances. That's our main strength, after all. About that. My instructor is a monk that just happened to know about dances. As a result, I've received plenty of combat instruction, but very little of the bardic side. I had to piece most of the latter together myself. I see. Well, if you're clever enough to come this far on your own, it shouldn't be hard to learn the rest from me. Ilishnish looked down at the Na dancer in surprise. In her experience, most people guarded their powers jealously, or at least kept them exclusive to members of the same guild or similar organizations. You'll teach me? How much will it cost? Free. Free? Of course. Mitra grinned. Above all else, a bard is a servant of culture and knowledge. We collect lore and help weave the fabric of society through the performing arts. Bards raising other bards is one of the best ways to do that. Oh, I need you to promise me one thing before I teach you, though. What's that? You must promise me that you'll teach at least one other person to become a dancer. You must also promise me that you'll have them make this promise, as well. Was it worth it? She would gain new power for the measly cost of one student. Then again, she didn't know how to teach. Maybe she could threaten Hegemil for his secrets. That's still pretty much free. I know, right? I knew you'd see it that way. A bard is a bard, no matter where they're from. Very well, Ilishnish nodded. I promise you that I'll raise at least one other dancer. Is there a time limit? Dying of old age could be considered a time limit, Mitra replied. Don't force anyone to become a dancer, though. Also, more than one would be great. Since she wouldn't die of old age, Elishnish could take all the time she wanted. That seems straightforward enough. When can we start? Well, I'm stuck here because these maniacs want to fling rocks at the giant rock, so we can begin right away. Also, what is it? I hope you don't mind, but I've never actually taught anyone how to be a dancer before. Or even a bard. Elishnish's tail flopped to the ground. I want my money back. You didn't pay anything. Anyway, I figure all I have to do is show you the basics and the rest should take care of itself. Like boom and boom and zam. Just like that. I suppose there's not much else to do but try. That's the spirit. Mitra brightened. Now, do you already do any regular dancing of your own? My decision to become a dancer was rather spontaneous, Elishnish said. I never studied any form of dance before becoming one. Everything she studied after that was also rooted in human culture. It would probably look extremely odd for a beast man to dance like one of them. Mitra crossed her arms, tilting her head back and forth as she hummed and hard. Maybe I should just teach you Losya? No, that would take too long. What's that? MMH, simply put, it's the feminine expression of dance where I come from. Tandava is the male expression. Losya conveys grace, happiness, enchantment and beauty. Traditionally, there are 108 Karanas that dancers need to learn, and the best dancers can eventually invoke. Her eyes are glazing over. Mitra, Karawaki said. Oh. Well, since you learned from a monk, you could see it as developing a martial discipline. Martial vocations have drills and each drill has the practitioner go through a series of moves. Those moves include footwork, offense, defense, positioning, and so on. A Karana would be the form one takes after making each move, and includes the transitional actions required to enter that form. That's where the similarities end. However, dancers are not warriors. Rather than perform martial arts, we perform dances. Elishnish blinked several times in the wake of Mitra's explanation. There were too many unknown words. Plus, she was certain that many of the words that she knew were being employed in a different sense from what she understood. I don't mean to be rude, Elishnish said, but is this lecture required? I learn much faster by doing rather than reading or listening. Not really. Most people want to know what they're doing, so I figured I'd start with a rundown. Well, I'll know when I figure it out. I don't think there's a point to superficially knowing something if I'm going to learn it anyway. I guess that's not wrong. There are some basics that I should probably explain, though. When a dancer performs a dance, they aren't merely moving their bodies in some predetermined way. They're using their very being to weave the effects of the dance. The Karana are aids to help the dancer conceptualize the way that they weave the universe's energies into the dance. All dancers end up with something similar to Karana, but they're unique to their respective cultures. Here's a simple example. Mitra walked over to a clear section of the plaza. Rather than perform anything that might be considered a dance, she gathered her steps to move a half step forward. Then she returned to her original position. Elishnish furrowed her brow as the Na dancer kept going back and forth. Don't look at me like that, Mitra laughed. This is something even cubs can do, but it's super important for dancers. Essentially, it's footwork, and this footwork is what allows you to keep dancing when you have to maneuver. Since you probably lean heavily toward Tandava due to your monk training, you also probably have a hard time maintaining your flow as a dancer. It was more that she couldn't maintain it at all if she was defending. While not everyone could simply have their way with her like Master Tian, even Orichalcum rank adventurers could keep Elishnish from maintaining any sort of rhythm or momentum to her offense. Well, Mitra said, you wanted to see it in practice, so go ahead and attack me. Are you sure? You probably can't hit me anyway. Elishnish pounced. Mitra flowed around her attack with a laugh. What did she just do? She turned and threw herself into a barrage of sweeping attacks, but her claws couldn't touch the Na dancer. Elishnish picked up her pace. Na supposedly had poor endurance, so she could at least wear Mitra down enough to connect. Losya is graceful, alluring, and receptive, Mitra said as she continued to evade Elishnish's attacks. One performing Losya is elusive, yet it is not afraid of being touched, guiding and embracing the advances of one's partner. Instead of tiring her out, it was somehow getting harder and harder to effectively attack Mitra. Ilishnish's next swipe was brushed past Mitra's face by a gentle movement of the Na's wrist, and Ilishnish found herself twirling away. She came to a stop on a cracked stone tile and turned to face the Beastman dancer. Losya is the dance of creation, Mitra said. The Na dancer's stance shifted, and she stamped her foot on the ground. Ilishnish's body jolted as a bolt of lightning came down from the gloomy sky and struck her squarely on the head. Ow! Ilishnish yelled. And Tandava is the dance of destruction, Mitra relaxed. It is the dance of excitement, vigor and the breaking of the old to make way for the new. A dancer on the battlefield flows seamlessly through the cycle of creation and destruction. Grandmaster dancers become Natraja, lords of the dance, who can invoke the power of Lord Shiva, the supreme being who creates, destroys and transforms the universe. Do I have a bald spot? Ilishnish rubbed her head. No, it was just a lightning bolt, Mitra shrugged. One of the best parts about having a bard around is that one can heal as long as they aren't dead. We can practice forever like this. Ilishnish stared down at her feet, looking for a scorch mark on the stone. You said I'm imbalanced toward Tandava, but I definitely can't do anything like that. I'm not sure if you ever will, Mitra said. Huh? Losya and Tandava are deeply tied to both the cultural and spiritual aspects of my people. I only meant it as a demonstration of how dances come into being. Expertise, discipline, and a strong conceptual framework are required to create many things. Magic, martial arts, skill and abilities, dances are no exception. Chances are that you'll take what you learn from me and come up with your own thing. Would the ability to drop lightning bolts on people be forever denied to her? She thought that she had at last found an alternative to her worrisome lack of magic casting capability. Maybe I overdid it, Mitra said. Let's learn all the little pieces first, then learn how to put them together. Like spell songs, dances are compositions. Instead of music and lyrics, however, a dancer uses their body. Since you can already use forms, you already understand that one can maintain a performance that way. Forms are like warrior stances, such as those that alter the balance of offensive power, defense and magic resistance. A warrior can still perform martial arts while maintaining a stance. But we don't perform martial arts like warriors. Right. Martial arts are like power but dancers are like na 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 tilde. Na 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 na. Yeah, like that, Mitra laughed nervously. Honestly, most people consider it a drawback. It takes a lot of experience for a dancer to get good at what they're doing. Not many can fight in pitched battles. And here I thought it was a human problem since they have poor natural weapons and armor. Well, that is a big problem, but it takes more than that to be a good dancer. The problem can actually be more pronounced for races that have excellent natural weapons and armor. Most are better off just being monks or bards instead because they don't reach the stage where they can dance and fight at the same time. Aside from myself, I only know a few dancers who can thrive outside of a controlled fight. Ilishnish wrung her paws anxiously. But I already became a dancer. Are you saying that I'm better off as something else? I'm not saying that. Mitra replied hurriedly, just going by our sparring just now, I think you'll do well. Listening to you go back and forth is giving me a headache, Karavaki said. This is like having two Mitras. That doesn't sound so bad, Mitra said. Combat choreography takes years for most to even begin to grasp, Karavaki told them, so you better get started right away. We're not going to be here for years. We're not, but, hey, you wanna come travel with us? After we are done here, we're going back to Stormport and crossing to the south side of the Cerulean Way. We'll be traveling through the desert on the other side to visit the Koshi Belt. I really can't be away from home for long at the moment, Ilishnish said, but thank you for the offer. What's the Koshi Belt, by the way? We've never been there before, Mitra replied, but it's supposed to be a high plateau region that straddles the equator near the western end of the continent. You're going off track again, Karavaki said. Arg, fine. Mitra flicked her ear, let's just do this. We'll figure out what we're doing later. Were there any fires? Nah, it was just Mitra screwing around. I see. Shork's eyes went back and forth between Saraka and Jiraka as the rough-looking Na bodyguard reported his findings. What sort of screwing around resulted in lightning bolts falling from the sky? Lady Shork. Sorry, where were we? The Masons wanted to begin restoration work on the Clanhold's second terrace, Master Lead said. But a handful of masons isn't going to get anything done quickly. Right. Following the minting demonstration, Shawk went around trying to figure out how to get started with her clan. The smiths would be minting coins until they ran out of copper to use, and it was up to her to use the coins to get things going. Unfortunately, it felt like everything had to happen at the same time. In the end, she decided to start by fixing up the old clanhold. At first, she felt that it was a selfish and shallow decision, but both Soraka and Davy agreed that it was the right move. Legitimacy, they called it. She had the means to pay people, but she needed a way to convince others that she was worth working for in the long term and re-establish her clan's economic and political hold over the surrounding territories. Impressing people with a nice-looking clanhold, or at least part of a nice-looking clanhold, would provide a much-needed push in the right direction, plus anything that they fixed up would stay that way. Additionally, the restored clanhold would provide security for the humans and they would be able to incorporate industrial facilities as part of the reconstruction. The faster they could get those facilities up, the sooner they would be able to produce more and better goods and expand her clan's economic power. What do they need? Shawk asked. Stone, Master Leeds answered. Shawk stared blankly at Master Leeds. If they wanted stones, they could just pick them up off of the ground. The guildmaster sighed. Are there any quarries in or around the city? He asked. I'm not sure what you're talking about. We haven't seen anything like an industrial quarry in our time here, Soraka filled in for her. They did exist at one point, however. They did? Shawk looked up at Soraka. There are 2 of them along this ridge, Soraka told her. They were probably used to construct the clanhold in the first place. The first is the Kuroko's cliffs. Cliffs don't look like that naturally, and they probably used the river to move stone around easily. That cliff in the back by the Fungus Farm project is actually another old quarry. If we can procure materials on site, Master Leeds said, that would reduce our overhead drastically. Is there some way we can take a look at the Kuroko's cliffs safely? Sure, Shawk said, it's just over here. She led them through the old lanes of the terrace to the top of the winding path that led down to the river. Master Leeds nodded to himself, his lips moving silently as he scanned the vista below. We may be able to kill 2 or 3 birds with 1 stone here, he said after a few minutes. I thought we were going to use stones for construction, Shawk said. It's a figure of speech. Wait, you don't have the equivalent saying in your culture? Our natural methods serve us well, Soraka said. We don't resort to using any tools to hunt, so equivalent sayings tend to not exist until we're exposed to those who do. Huh? Well, what I was trying to say was that we can achieve 2 objectives by quarrying stone along the riverfront. First, we'll be getting building materials to fix up everything on top here. Secondly, we'll be expanding the area below to build proper port facilities for your ships. Since there wasn't room for all the river barges that they came in with, they were anchored further upriver until they were needed. The existing boardwalk was narrow as well. 1 beastman had to squish themselves against the cliff to let another pass. How big are you going to make it? Shawk asked. That depends on how ambitious you want to be, Master Leeds said. I don't know whether you consider your territory large or small, but as far as human settlements go, you can stick an entire city on the hill here. Now that he mentioned it, human cities were small. River Garden was comparable in land area to her clanhold atop the ridge. The tribes in the Draconic Kingdom said that a human female could have 20 children in about as many years, so she would probably have a small human city's worth of people in a generation. What do you recommend? We're cutting into the mountain, the guildmaster replied, so I suggest making the waterfront large enough to support the clanhold and its surrounding territories in the future. It'll be more stone than we need, so we can store that all away for maintenance or renovations later on. As for warehouses, we can excavate storage areas using the same methods that your people used to create the inn. How much of the hill will be left? Most of it, Master Leeds smirked. I was thinking of creating a 100-meter-long stretch for now. It'll also carve out 50 meters of the hill and we can cut new berths for your ships. Shawk looked down at the waterfront, trying to imagine what the changes would look like. A worrying thought occurred to her. With so many changes, she said, won't people get curious about what's going on? It's nice that we can do things, but not being noticed is our main form of security right now. That's true. How long do you think it'll take to operate safely? To be frank, She had no idea. If enough people got it into their heads that human flesh was worth a try, Shulk wouldn't be able to defend the clanhold against them. Soraka would probably help if need be, but those who failed were sure to try again once he left. Is there some other way of getting stone that keeps everyone out of sight? I'm not sure, Master Leeds replied. The others might have some ideas. Developing some infrastructure to better facilitate commerce was the first thing that came to mind as a master of the Merchant Guild. I've seen what I wanted to see, so we can head back now. They returned to the human plaza on the second terrace, which by now had been transformed into a small village of tents surrounding the square. The humans had partitioned out the space into different sections housing the different industries represented by the artisans and their families. On its western side was a collection of temporary facilities that made up the Forge District, which consisted of what the humans considered heavy industry. Blacksmiths, masons, carpenters and tanners were the most notable, at least to her, amongst them. Shulk found that most of the humans in the section were at the smithy, where they had gathered around a table with various rocks scattered on top of it. Did we run out of copper already? Shulk asked. No, Lady Shulk, one of the blacksmiths replied. But we did run out of fuel. It'll be a few days until we have a decent amount of charcoal to work with. He produced a small bag and offered it to her. Shulk opened the strap and found it half filled with copper coins. She frowned inwardly at the result of their morning's work. Winning a bout in the fighting pits earned her about 6 copper coins. The bag had at least 10 times the amount. It made all the risks that she had taken to get ahead laughable in hindsight. Thanks, she said. We were just talking about materials to fix up the clanhold with, but I don't want to do anything that will put everyone at risk for now. Do you have any ideas? The men and women around the table exchanged amused glances with one another before looking down at the rocks displayed before them. Since we don't have any tasks to deal with, the blacksmith said, we did a little prospecting. Mostly sifting through the ruins of this place and checking what's under all the dirt that's built up. We already saw plenty coming up the cliff last night, but what we found confirms what we suspected we'd find. What did you find? Shulk asked. This hill is basalt, so most of the things one would find from it. It's amazing really, since this place doesn't have any of the relevant industries. Everything that had been long stripped away around human settlements is just sitting around here plain as day. The blacksmith pointed to the largest rock on the table. It looked like a huge gold nugget covered in shiny black crystals. That one's a godsend, he said. Is it gold? Nah, it's magnetite embedded in a chunk of chalcopyrite. In other words, iron and copper. Smelting these ores also produces glass as a byproduct. This is most of what they mine in the Draconic Kingdom's southern provinces. His hand drifted over the table to pick up a milky green crystal. This is olivine. Jewelry-grade olivine is known as berry dough, which we'll set aside for our jewelers. Our alchemists can get magnesium and glass from the rest. Magnesium is used as a reagent for all sorts of things, including iron and steel production. The next sample was a cluster of silvery black crystals. Next to it was a ruddy-looking rock. These two look different, but they're both hematite. The fancy-looking sample is probably better turned into jewelry, but the rest can be smelted into iron. Everything on this table can either be smelted, alchemically refined or turned into jewelry. Those colorful rocks are some random gemstones we found, but I think most of that stuff's been picked up by your people already. Next, he pointed at a ball of yellowish-red clay. That's dirt, Shulk said. It is, the blacksmith nodded. But it's metal-rich dirt. If it comes down to it, we can get that metal out. Shulk furrowed her brow at the clay ball. There was metal in dirt? She didn't know how much work went into everything, but it sounded as if they didn't need to go anywhere to get anything. Can you find this stuff everywhere? She asked. Yes, the blacksmith answered. Including the Draconic Kingdom, the lands that the Rolengork runs through are composed of the same rock formations and can contain the same minerals. If you have any other ridges like this in your territory or make connections with other tribes and clans with access to the same features, we'll have plenty to work with. There were plenty of small ridges and valleys in her clan's former territory, but the problem was that it was former territory. Her ancestral lands, which once covered over 2,000 square kilometers, had been lost to the city or the tribes that split off from her clan as it weakened. All that was left was the ridge where her clanhold was and the area along one side of the lake behind the dam. How that goes will depend on whether I can pull all of our old tribes back in, Shulk said. Is there anything we can do for now? Renovating the clan hold should provide a big pile of materials, the blacksmith replied. We've been talking over it with the masons, architects and carpenters. Everyone thinks that it's better to just rebuild. From what we've seen, your people have been making what homes they could out of what's left of this place, and what's left is slowly falling apart. We can increase the relative height between terraces by lowering the second and third levels. That'll give us plenty of construction materials to use, make things more secure, and give everyone more living space. It'll let us put in some proper plumbing, too. Can you describe what it will look like? Shulk asked. The architects will be imitating the style used in the ruins here, the blacksmith answered. Aside from that, you beast meant at also a 2-story structure would be around 7 meters high. Right now, the height difference between each terrace is about 5 meters. We want to double it to accommodate the new buildings. In that case, Master Lead said, we'll have more materials than we know what to do with. We'd start from the side facing the river and work our way around, the blacksmith said. It'll look like a quarry for a while, but once we get buildings up and landscapings done, we can refer to what remains around here to fix it up as good as new. She wondered whether it would be the case. According to Soraka and his companions, what used to be here was extremely advanced, far more advanced than anything in the Draconic Kingdom. Still, having new homes was better than living in the broken remains of old stone structures. You can go ahead with that, I guess, Shulk said, but don't do everything all at once. I want to see what it looks like before deciding whether it's worth it or not. Sure, we can do a stretch to showcase the project. Now that that's settled, we gotta settle the matter of labor. Shulk looked down at the bag of coins in her paw. This was the part that she was the most uncertain about. Copper coins could be used to pay laborers, but she needed to keep making them back. Originally, the idea was that the fungus farm would sell fodder for the nug herds, and the proceeds from that would go toward paying for security and the continued expansion of the fungus farm. Now, that idea extended to all of the industries that the humans she had brought back with her from the Draconic Kingdom could work in. Furthermore, Soraka had lectured her on the idea of taxes on their trip. They were something like tribute, but more regular and well-defined. Essentially, she would be collecting resources to pay for everything that went into providing security, infrastructure and various other things for the people that lived in her territory. Figuring out how much she should tax for any given thing was complicated. As it was a puzzle that she only had a few of the pieces to. Most of those pieces involved how much money she needed to spend not only on warriors for security, but also civil servants that did all manner of things related to keeping things running. The informal system of warbands and elders that tribes and clans relied on wouldn't be enough to keep up in a city, as evidenced by Khorstorofi Keral's directional estate. Alongside that challenge came the need for literacy. She needed to pay people for that, too. According to Mitra, what they had could barely be counted as a written language, so she suggested that they simply learn what the Draconic Kingdom had. The human clerks that came with them were more than happy to help with that, but the problem was that there were sounds in their language that a sailor couldn't vocalize. Well, I don't need any of that to hire laborers, I hope. Shulk placed the bag of coins on the table and cleared some of the rocks away. She pulled out a pair of coins and placed them in front of her. According to Master Leeds, she said, we need to pay each common laborer this much, right? Well, a day's labor is worth 3 portions of meat, Master Leeds said, and a copper trade coin is worth 2. The Merchant Guild doesn't cut coins in half as some countries do with their local currency, so that's the bare minimum we can pay anyone for a day's labor. You could just hire someone for 2 days with 3 coins, Soraka said, or is that unreliable? No, Davy said, she should stick to 2 copper coins per day. Why's that? Shulk asked. Because 1 coin is worth 2 portions of meat. I don't get it. Davy flicked her ear. Shulk flinched away. Say you're a common laborer, the Na merchant said. 1 day of work gets you 3 portions. 1 is for yourself. The other is for your mate. The last is for your cub. How do you pay for anything aside from food? Your mate works too. Usually, a family in the city has 2 or 3 cubs and both parents work. The extra copper coins go toward other necessities. That being said, doing things that way was dangerous. Both adults leaving a den to work not only meant that young cubs were left unattended, but others could come in and take over. I know many merchants and artisans would say that it's a result of a highly competitive labor pool, but the situation in Costa Kerala is such that nearly everyone is living in poverty. If you get badly injured or get extremely sick, you just starve, and so does your family. But that's normal, Shawk said. Rolengork is overcrowded, Jiraka said. The clans along the borders can just fight the neighbors to make use of their excess population, but the cities can't. This isn't unique to Costa Kerala. Every city has a slum, and when you can't work, you die. That's broadly true, Davy admitted. The situation in Costa Kerala is a result of Rolengork's stagnating economy being stretched thin over the generations. But what's happening here is not part of that old paradigm. The efficiency of land utilization and the development of industry under Shawk will increase the capacity of whoever adopts these systems, which only delays the inevitable. Not necessarily, Davy said. If she continues to heed the counsel of druids like Elder Potley, Shawk will have the opportunity to avoid the same situation before she hits the next growth ceiling. Quality of life will improve as a result of balanced development. Jiraka snorted. Yeah, until the impoverished masses who didn't balance their growth come after her clan because they want a piece of their superior quality of life. No one with any expertise on the matter claims that being a lord is easy, Jiraka said. Discouraging that sort of thing is part and parcel of running a clan and its territory. We've already discussed that part, anyway. But 2 copper coins is equivalent to a warrior's pay, Shawk said. We can't pay laborers the same as warriors. That's another thing I wanted to address, Davy said. You're going to want to develop some sort of pay scale soon. What's that? A way to compensate people based on their training, skill and time. The way people are paid right now is absurd. You need to attract the best and brightest to participate in your clan's economy. Shawk glanced down at her coins. It felt like she had a lot of them just a moment ago. I don't have to do that right away, do I? No, Davy shook her head. Right now, the city is a giant pool of unskilled laborers. The skilled laborers are mostly artisans who are compensated through the goods that they produce. You're raising warriors out of the members of your own clan, but training them to be more than just a brute will take time. On the note of warriors, Jiraka said, humans actually make for extremely good policing forces. Really? Why is that? Why is a question no one has been able to answer, but the results speak for themselves. Assuming the same veterancy as their demi-human counterparts, humans tend to become more skilled in their vocation. Beastmen tend to have a raw physical advantage over their human counterparts, but when one is working as part of a civilian policing force, you mostly want them there for their skills. Having a mix of different races to account for various situations is optimal, but right now you only have Osalo and humans. But I didn't get any human warrior slaves. Ah, but that's where humanity's greatest advantage comes in, Jiraka said. Simply put, humans have no racial predisposition toward any particular thing. They can become a wide variety of skilled professionals with the appropriate training. I don't suggest telling your artisans to do this, but you'll inevitably have human children growing up in their families that are convinced that they want to do something different from their parents. Rather than forcing them to work some job that they'll be miserable in, you can just take advantage of their willingness to try something new. Every time they broached a new topic, Shawk felt like she was being buried in even more information. She understood that Jiraka's time in Rolengork was limited and he just wanted to see her off to a good start, but it was overwhelming nonetheless. We'd never pay off our indentures on 4 copper a day anyway, Master Leeds smirked. All this discussion aside, what we need right now is strong bodies to carry the stone our masons cut out of the hill. We'll continue minting copper coins once we get more charcoal, but we'll also start iron production for spare tools and machine parts. How many coins will we be able to mint per day? Shawk asked. It's going to be irregular at first, to be honest, Master Leeds said. Rolengork's artisans only purchase the jewelry-grade stuff, so their suppliers throw away the rest. That's to our advantage in the long run since it means all the junk is cheap to get, but we have to set up supply lines. Shawk pointed to the rocks on the table. What about these? We'll likely find more of it, Master Leeds said, but metal production in general is going to be erratic until we secure steady supplies through trade. Prospecting might be an option as well. Speaking of which, we'd like to check the inside of your in-suites for veins of ore. I don't mind, Shawk said, but what do you have to do to find them? We'll know them by sight. You might have already seen them. They look like streaks running through the stone. Ah, those. We painted them over to make the walls of the suites look nicer. The men and women around the table stared at her. Shawk cringed. Sorry, I didn't know. It'll be harder, but we'll still be able to find them. Anyway, refining malachite yields about half its weight in copper, so we'll have about 500 coins using what we bought along the way here. We have 2 mason families with us, so we don't need to hire too many laborers. 1 team should do for now. How many people is a team? That's a good question. We don't know how much Osalo can haul, but 4 is probably a good start. And, just like that, half of her copper coins were gone in a month. The ups and downs of her finances were going to make her sick. Are you sure this is going to work? Shawk asked. I was actually going to ask if we could use the rest of it, Master Leeds said. What? Money is meant to be used, Davy told her. It's no good to anyone just sitting around. I know you're worried about whether your clan can sustain this, but you have plenty of people who know how things work. In the past, you only hid yourself to fund things, but you're supposed to be running a clan now. A lord can't personally do every little thing. Though she said so, it was still difficult to stomach. 500 copper coins was enough for Shawk to feed herself for 3 years, and now everyone expected her to manage that huge sum and even more ridiculous amounts. I'm not sure if this will make things better for you or worse, Master Leeds said, but minting coins was just something we wanted to show you first. Those raw materials we brought up along the way are going to be manufactured into goods that are worth far more than 500 copper coins. ARGH. Shawk screeched, fine. We'll use everything. What did you want to do with the rest? We've covered this topic before, Soraka told her. Aside from labor, you need to invest in professional development and infrastructure. You have a project, which is the renovation of your clanhold, and working on that project essentially does that. How does it help with professional development? Your clanhold is pretty big, Soraka replied. The workforce you have right now won't get you anywhere in a sane amount of time. To complete the project in a few years, you're going to need thousands of people. That's not only the masons and hired laborers, but everyone working in the industries directly involved in the renovations, plus all the industries that support those industries. For instance, a mason requires equipment, and that equipment is created by the artisans in the plaza here. Everyone needs to eat, so you need people for that as well. Putting all those people to work results in the development of a skilled labor pool. Conveniently, humans didn't only eat meat. Osalo could go into the trees and forage fruits, nuts, and a variety of edible plants from around the jungle. From her experience hunting monkeys and birds in the canopy, one could easily find that sort of thing simply by locating where their quarry fed. In that sense, humans could occupy the same territory as beastmen without competing for the same food, or at least as much of it. Does that mean I have to go out and personally hire people for every industry? We can use the guild system for that, Master Leeds told her. In a human city, people who learn a craft from a master artisan are called apprentices. Those apprentices have to pay for their training, and those without the immediate means to do so usually sign a contract of indenture. This includes children of said artisans, but, obviously, their parents don't treat them as slaves, nor are they as stringent with compensation as they would be with a stranger. So you're suggesting that I do the same thing with them as I did with you? That's right, the guildmaster nodded. Just like us, the apprentice becomes a bonded servant. Also, it doesn't have to be you in the future. Independent master artisans are the main source of professional education, and they'll be doing it too. By the time an apprentice's work for their master has paid off the cost of their training, they'll be well on the way to becoming masters themselves. In a way, it's a guarantee of employment while the apprentice establishes themselves as artisans in their own right. So once they complete their contract, Shawk said, they're free to go? They become freedmen again, yes. In your case, you want them to stick around and put what they've learned to use for you. That should be pretty easy. After all, you'll be the only one with a nice big set of working facilities. At that point, they become employees of the workshops that you build. Will it really work that way? Well, it's a system that has been refined over centuries. If it didn't work that way, it wouldn't work that way. Any potential problems would have to do with the acceptance of those in authority and issues that crop up due to differences in species. Soraka cleared his throat. The guild system is near universal in the civilized world, he said. Since Shulk will be the one in authority, the only issues with acceptance would be from outside of her clan. The work of the artisans will speak for itself, but opponents may try to undermine their efforts for one reason or the other. I'm not sure if they would go so far as to attack her clanhold, Davy sniffed, but, even so, it would be to their detriment. Ignoring something useful out of some irrational agenda will only cause those that try to promote that agenda to fall behind. As long as you can defend your assets, you and those who work with you will gain an inexorable advantage while those who do not will languish in darkness. When it came to business, Davy was merciless. Even so, she only seemed to do things that were helpful in some way. I'll start asking around for people who might be interested in becoming an apprentice, Shulk said. It's probably going to be hard to explain to them, though. That should take care of itself in time, Davy said. As the people around the clanhold see what the humans are up to, you'll inevitably have people who decide that they can make a living out of it. A lord is a being that brings order to a chaotic world. All you need to do, Shulk, is establish and maintain order. Those who wish to build upon that foundation will come on their own. Just make sure what they're building is what you want, Jariku said. What do you mean by that? Shulk asked. Well, doing this sort of thing attracts all sorts. People will naturally come to take advantage of the situation, but at least some of them will do it in an undesirable way. Being recognized as the next big thing is gonna bring all of the crooks and parasites of this city straight to you. Shulk's paw went to the scruff of her neck as she tried to calm herself down. More problems. It felt as if every time it looked like she would take a step forward, something threatened to drag her back. As she continued to puzzle out what to do, a small crowd of humans gathered on the eastern side of the plaza. Soraka craned his neck to see what was going on, then nodded to himself for some reason. This is a good time to take a break, he said. Let's head over there and listen in.